Perfect. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Very warm welcome to this dialogue with our new guest today, and I'll talk in a minute about the guest. A little bit about Leadership at Humanity, what we do and why we do what we do. So we at Leadership at Humanity are a set of passionate individuals who are committed to ignite humanity in business leadership. That's what we started off with, and that's what gets us up every day. We run initiatives which help us to extend the dialogue about de-stressing the business environment and making it more humane. And LEH dialogues are critical part of that, the foundation of our movement, if I may say. So we started these dialogues about 2 years back when we invited our first guest with about 10 people joining in from a very small group of people who started this movement. And now we have a much bigger audience which comes around both live as well as through our videos to contribute to these conversations. What we do in these dialogues is we invite leaders, thought leaders, influencers, who help extend the conversation on humanity, or those leaders who are doing something which is significantly changing the shape of our future. So I feel privileged to have people around us, both people like yourself who join these conversations to give us that energy to continue going on, and then people who agree to be our guests on this dialogue or in these conversations, which help us to keep it going and keep the movement moving forward. So today, I am delighted to welcome our guest, Lural Ramírez. I met Lural through one of our attendees today and also our advisory board members, Karma, who's on the call, I would say about 6 months back, and I had one conversation, and I was really taken in by her passion for what she does. And when I heard Lural's story of how she has constructed a life which is full of choices, which put her or stretched her boundaries, put her out of her comfort zone, but she followed that passion to make an impact in the world around us. I'm a big believer that education, the purpose of education is not only knowledge creation. The purpose of education is to really build leaders who will shape our future or shape the future of our society. So Lural is the head of UWC, one of the most kind of well-known institutions, education institutions in Asia. She heads UWC of Thailand. And she's been working with the students and with the educators to help shape leaders of future with both character as well as capabilities. She's transitioned through the cultures, through the geographies, as I said, pushed her boundaries, made some choices, which makes her a very special human being who's touching lives. I remember in my childhood, my mother used to say that if in your lifetime you touch one life, you have lived your life well. And I think she's in a position where, Lural, you are touching so many lives around you who will make such a huge impact on the world, which we will inherit or our kids will inherit in the years to come. The way we have structured this conversation is I will very shortly hand over to Lural to share with us her story, what makes her who she is, what made her take the choices or make the choices she made. And then, like we do in every dialogue, I'll have about 20 minutes of conversation with Lural. And I'll like to have more insights on her choices, her decisions, her impact, and why she does what she does. And then we have open Q&A. So all of you, my request is, please bring up your questions in the dialogue box as you hear me, hear Lural, and then I will moderate. I will bring up those questions up to Lural, and then we will address those. So that's how we have structured the conversation today. Don't wait for your questions till the end. You can just put it up simply in the dialogue box, and we'll make sure those are covered. So that's how we plan the next hour or so. And without further ado, I'm going to invite our guest today, Lural Ramírez. Over to you, Lural. So Lural needs to go off mute. Yes.
Here we go. Thank you, Sophia. I think Sophia was helping me out there. Thank you so much, Sophia. And thank you, Atul, and to everyone who is on the call. I really appreciate you showing up. Hopefully this is going to be an interesting conversation for you. And I hope you get something out of it. And as Atul said, I'll be very receptive of any questions along the way so that it can be much more like a dialogue and a conversation than just listening to me drone on and on. So I think Sophia is going to pull some slides up on the screen. Thank you so much, Sophia. It's like magic. Very appreciative for the support today, Sophia. Yeah, so I wanted to be able to walk you through a bit what we're calling kind of carving a new future, right? And that ability to be able to consider your story. And as an educator, it's something that we work a lot with our students on, but I think it's something that, gosh, as an adult, I continue to work on understanding who I am and how my life's experiences have contributed to the values that I hold dear and the ways that I perceive things. And I think it's an interesting journey to kind of reconsider on a regular basis, right? To be able to really think about the ways in which we see the world and what experiences we've had that might contribute to that being changed in some way or impacted in some way. So I'll bring you a bit through that journey of my life so far at 42 years young, to be able to consider a bit about the early informative years that I had, what I'm calling a bit of transformative years. What a lot of people have told me are bold choices, and I'm now recognizing are not traditionally choices that people make. And then that eventual pathway to supporting future leaders. So if you can move to the next slide, please, Sophia, thank you. Sophia, thank you so much. So if I start with my early informative years, I would mostly kind of frame it as a life in contrast. So I was born in Northern California on the west coast of the United States, in the mountains that you see on the left side of the screen there. But I moved as a young child to the Central Valley, which is a huge valley in the middle of the state of California, in a very a city, in an agricultural area. And it was not necessarily the place that, as our family we wanted to be living, but it was where we needed to live. And so because we didn't really want to be in that city, my parents would take us out into nature as much as we could. We spent our weekends and all of our vacations out camping and in nature as often as we could. Both of my parents are now retired, but they were educators. And that value of education was always present in my life from the time that I was very young. As Dr. Jill Biden has said, teaching is not a job, it's a lifestyle. And I do think that that's true, right? When you grow up around educators, it just becomes a way that you see the world. And even though as a young child, I told everyone that would ask me that I was never going to be a teacher. And then when I became a teacher, I told them I would never become an administrator. So you should obviously be very careful about the things you say you'll never do. I think that education really just sat in my heart and in my soul. And I think it was quite inevitable that end up where I would end up in my career. So as a child, I lived in the city, but I spent so much time in the country. I was always extremely nerdy, very academically minded. I just really like a challenge. I like a cognitive challenge. I like a physical challenge. I like things to be difficult. And so I was always kind of that kid in school asking for extra homework, getting up early just to get to school on time. Really, really loved learning, but I was also and still to this day continue to just be obsessed with athletic pursuits. I just love sports. And so I was a competitive basketball player, volleyball player, and a competitive runner. And I just really, really love sports. And so there was this constant kind of contrast, right, between being very book-minded, but then also being very athletic and sporty and living in the city, but spending all of our free time in the country. And then I would kind of frame it as a lot of kind of just striving, but thriving. I've realized through my life that people oftentimes question why I push myself to do so much, to go so fast, to do things so hard. but I find a lot of joy and passion in that. I think that's how I thrive. As my husband once said, he doesn't know what race I'm in, but he's pretty sure I'm winning, which is just kind of a reference to this obsession to kind of do a lot and to do it quickly. Which I don't know as I get older how much I'll continue with that same pace, but I really do feel this sense of just incredible responsibility. You know, as Atul said, it's an amazing thing to work with young people, but I think we all just have an enormous responsibility, and I'm really grateful that I'm healthy. I'm really grateful that I'm well, and I just wonder to myself what I can do each and every day, and how much can I give back, and how much can I contribute, and what can I squeeze out of a day? One of the things that I think from my early childhood really kind of shifted my mind and my heart towards service was involvement in a program called 4-H, which I think is a very American thing. And so I'm not sure how much from an international audience perspective people will be familiar with 4-H, but that's a picture of me in the middle there with my dog. And I was a member of 4-H, which is very much a service-oriented kind of youth development program. It's a really, really lovely program, and it's community-based and really open to all. And there's lots of ways that you can take 4-H, but I took it in the direction of care for animals. And so I had llamas and I had dogs, and I lived in the city, you know, so our animals were oftentimes out in the country. And I just always had this love for animals. And with those animals, we would do a lot of service. We would go and visit old people's homes, and we would participate in parades. And so there's just always this notion of kind of giving back and empathy and kind of caring for others. If you can head to the next slide, please, Sophia. So transitioning from there, I'd move into what I'm going to frame here as my transformative years. I was really fortunate coming out of high school to be accepted into what was at that time called Linfield College. They've since changed their name to Linfield University, which, you know, huge plug for Linfield, one of the most incredible universities. I really do see it as a real turning point in my life. Because what I learned from Linfield was the power of being in a space that was, again, very academically minded, very rigorous, but with these incredible caring adults who just loved us so much. You know, I had such close and caring relationships with my professors, and I knew them as human beings. I used to go to my Spanish professor's house on the weekends and have breakfast with her, and we'd talk about the books that we were reading. And, you know, I just knew her as a human being who cared a lot about me and about my learning. And she mentored me, and she would talk to me about the dreams that I had and the ways that I was going. At that point, I graduated with bachelor's in Spanish and in communication. So I was heading down a journalism path, which I love. Still to this day, I say when I grow up, I want to be a journalist. But I'm realizing now that really I was heading toward education. And it was in my second year at Linfield University that with that same professor, Violeta, we went to the place where she had her home in the Copper Canyon in Mexico, in a very small town in the middle of that beautiful canyon that you see in the picture at the top of the screen. And we were there for a month. We were there to learn Spanish. We were there to give back to the community. We all had to have service projects. I was 19 years old. And on the third day that I was there, I met my husband. And, you know, I had just gone to the side of a river with some friends, and we were playing cards and singing. And I came home from that, and I told my roommate, I'm going to marry Alejandro. And she said, you are insane. And I was like, maybe, but trust me, I'm going to marry him. And I did. We, you know, spent 3 weeks of just friendship together, really. Just such good friends. But I knew from the moment that I met him that we would be married. He was in university in Mexico. I was in university in the US. But my heart, you know, stayed in Urique with the Mexican family there and with my husband. And when we both graduated from our undergraduate degrees, we got married. So we were married very young. And then those are our 3 kids that we had very young as well. And after Alejandro graduated, he moved to the United States, and we started a career as teachers in a high poverty school in the US. That was the most beautiful and most wonderful school, continues to be, where, you know, you really felt each day like you were doing really important work. I was hired specifically at 22 years old, so very young, to help lead the transformation of the school from an English-only school into a dual immersion school. And so it was 11 years of a community coming together for such a noble purpose. And my master's degree in education that I did between that time was a very socially justice focused master's degree. And I think that also really impacted my life and transformed the way that I think about the possibilities of where we take our lives and what we do with the time that we have and with the knowledge that we have. And that ability to have an awareness of the world and to be ready to act with this common humanity, right? Which I had really first ingrained at Linfield, where people really cared for each other. I realized in that school, there's such an important impact that we can have on people's lives. And we choose the impact that we have, right? When I came out of my master's degree and looked for jobs and for work, there were opportunities where I could have made more money. I could have worked with a much easier student population. And I'm really grateful that I chose to work with students who really needed me, and to work in a community that was really community oriented. And so I still feel today, no matter where I've gone in my education career, like that community approach and that wraparound servicing that you experience in a high poverty school that's run well, where people are really seeing the entire unit of a child's family as an important aspect of their learning and their growth, is just something I really carry with me today, as I do Mexico. Our home is now in Mexico. And so when we lived in the US and then left the US eventually, which you can move on to the next slide for that, Sophia, please, we then transitioned. So now we have a house in that beautiful canyon in Mexico. So it was 11 years in the US. We literally were like living the American dream. We had this beautiful historic home in a downtown area. We had 2 dogs, 2 cars, we literally had a picket fence, it's what you see in movies. And I remember saying to my husband one day, I don't know what the dream is, but this is not it. I cannot do this. And I think looking back on it, it just felt a little too easy. Like we had gotten really good at the thing that we were doing. And I just didn't feel the same amount of challenge. I once listened to a podcast with Barack Obama, and he talked about being able to see the ambiguities in life without being paralyzed by them. And I wanted that for my life, right? I wanted to be able to go into ambiguous spaces and feel strong and not feel paralyzed. And I really just do believe that when you come from especially positions of comfort and privilege, like I'm very fortunate to have done, then you really have to put yourself into positions of challenge, so that you can be as strong as you can be, to be as helpful and supportive of the community as you can be. So we sold our beautiful house, and we packed up that car that you see at the top of the screen. We got rid of everything. If it didn't fit inside the car, it was not going with us. We moved to Mexico, left everything in our small cabin in Mexico, and we moved to Costa Rica. And we moved to a jungle in Costa Rica in a beautiful ecological school called Futuro Verde. And it's an amazing school that was, again, very, very values driven, because they have a really strong emphasis on bringing scholarship students into the school environment. So 30% of the students come in with some form of financial aid, and they were becoming an IB World School. So it was exactly what I've always wanted, right? This really values-driven education, holistically minded. They're also extremely sustainability focused. And so it was a wonderful opportunity. We spent 8 years in Costa Rica to really see how a school community could truly have a sustainability focus. But again, kids living in a very rural area, I cannot say enough how rural it is. It is an incredibly rural area that we lived in, only dirt roads, howler monkeys in the trees outside the classrooms. But there's this IB education, right? Kids graduating with an international baccalaureate diploma, which is just unheard of. But again, after 8 years, we had always been bilingual in the home. Spanish and English were not a challenge for our kids any longer. And we really felt like we're getting too comfortable. This is too easy. We need to make a change. So right before the pandemic, I notified the board that I wouldn't be renewing my contract. And then the pandemic hit, and I thought, oh man, that was probably a really bad idea. But regardless, we took off. And for 7 months, we traveled through Central America, Mexico, and the US in the middle of the pandemic, which was slightly insane, but the most wonderful thing ever. So the car at the bottom is the car that we drove out of Costa Rica. But we were actually on bikes most of the time. So those are my kids now all grown up. And my children and I were on bicycle. My husband drove the car, and we spent 7 months going through Central America, into Mexico, and then eventually up to the US, where my parents still live in Oregon. And it was in Costa Rica that I started my interview process with UWC Thailand. I did the majority of my interviews in Nicaragua, and we were crossing the border from Honduras to Guatemala when I got the job in UWC Thailand. So it was a very exciting Central American experience. And then I could really enjoy the sabbatical because the job had been secured. And so it was, when we made that choice to take this sabbatical journey with, take our kids out of school for 7 months, everyone told us we were crazy, just like they did when we moved to Costa Rica, just like they did when we sold everything and left the US. And then when we told everyone in Latin America and in the US that we were moving to the other side of the world, did we hear that again? You are absolutely crazy. What is wrong with you all? But I think in our minds, we had been in the West for so long. And that value of kind of complexity and seeing your way through complexity and that wisdom that comes from Western ways of thinking. I was really curious what an Eastern framing of thought would be and how that could contribute to the way that we see the world. I'm intrigued by my own children who have grown up in the US, Mexico, Costa Rica, and now Thailand, and what amazing human beings they will surely become, as they are never comfortable either. And I think it's that constant comfort with discomfort that is our goal. If you can move to the next slides, please, Sophia. And so now I'm here at UWC Thailand, as Atul shared. And the United World College movement, for those who are not familiar with it, is an incredibly inspiring educational movement. And I joke sometimes once you become a UWC head, it'll be difficult to ever move on to anything else because it's such an inspiring pedagogy and such an amazing commitment to exactly what in my heart lies as my values of social justice and this steadfast commitment to diversity. So for those of you not familiar with how the UWC movement works, most UWC schools and colleges, and there's 18 around the world, are 2-year colleges. So they're grades 11 and 12, the very last 2 years of high school. For us, we're through school. So in UWC Thailand, we have age 2 all the way through grade 12. But in grade 11 is a really interesting entry point for students. It's really challenging to get into a United World College anywhere in the world, no matter whether you're 2 years old or 16 years old. But at that grade 11 stage, it's incredibly challenging to get in because that's the moment in time when the majority of admissions into United World Colleges does not come from the school itself, like you would in a normal admissions process. Those admissions processes are run through what are called national committees and volunteer admissions teams in 150 countries around the world run a very, very competitive selections process for students to be able to be chosen, to be placed and nominated at one of the 18 United World Colleges around the world. And so it's a really inspiring process, and out of it, we get these incredible students. And I think the most important part of the process, beyond the fact that they're just incredibly inspired children with amazing intellect, is that we first look at the quality of them as human beings, and as a last step, look at their ability to pay. And so students come into the United World College movement, whether they can pay or not. And that is a really beautiful equalizer, I think, within especially an international school context. Specific to United World College Thailand, we have students from 99 different countries. We're currently at 520 students. And we really pride ourselves on a very innovative and transformative educational model. And when we first left the US and the US public system, one of the things that we were keen to move away from was this public education framework that was limiting in so many ways, where we were told that if there was time, we could teach science. If we had enough minutes after doing double reading and double math, maybe we could do a little social studies. It's interesting to be in an independent school where you make the choices of what is taught. And so what we choose at United World College Thailand is a very innovative learning model for our students. And so they get all of those basic subjects, but they get them through the International Baccalaureate curriculum, and they get that from the primary years all the way through the diploma years. And it's a very inquiry-based approach to learning, where students are making their decisions on their own, and they're thinking through their own pathways of learning, and they're taking a lot of agency and leadership in the way that they go about learning. And then on top of all of the, just kind of regular in-class learning and interdisciplinary studies, there's a very strong focus, especially at our school, on outdoor education. So our students spend an incredible amount of time in these outdoor pursuits that, as a person obsessed with sport and the outdoors, it's like my dream. I mean, I just think to myself, goodness, if I as a child had been able to have these experiences, it just would have changed my life from such an earlier time in my life. And so the picture that you see there is a group of our students out on a kayaking adventure. But they also have this amazing commitment to service as a part of any UWC. We have long-standing service partners, and students do regular service to the extent that being service-minded just becomes a part of who they are. And very, very unique to United World College Thailand, but very close to my heart, is mindfulness. We have actually been fortunate to have mindfulness be a part of each of the school communities that we have worked at over the years. And mindfulness is a core tenet to UWC Thailand. And I think it's a really interesting concept to focus on mindfulness within a school, especially in the period of time that we're in right now from a global perspective, and the amount of conflict that exists in the world, to be putting forth leaders into the world who are mindful and who are taking care of themselves and taking care of the way that they interact with others, I think is a real opportunity. So our motto as a school, good heart, balanced mind, healthy body, kind of speaks to that commitment that we have as a school to be mindful and to take care of ourselves and to take care of others. So more than anything, I would say that at this stage in my career, after having led in different school contexts, this is an opportunity to really be a leader of leaders in a way that I've never had before. And as Atul said, it's an incredible opportunity, but more than anything, it's an incredible responsibility, right? Because that modeling that we have as leaders for those around us, the way that we engage in every part of our day and the way that we are and who we are, is just an incredible example that we're setting for better or for worse every single day. And so I try and hold myself to be aligned to my values and to really live who I think is important that I be, and to be able to take any semblance of power that I might have as a head of school and then help those that most need me to help, right? If we have some power, maybe use it for good. And passionately, as a female leader, and those that know me well know how much I speak of this, I really think it's important that we lead with vulnerability. And so I try and model that myself. And I'm mindful of that as a person who I know that I am very strong and I can withstand a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. And so I try and be quite mindful about how I might be able to show to my team that I'm also a person capable of vulnerability, right? And capable of speaking about things that are challenging for me in times when I feel stressed and times when I don't know what to do. And really just kind of modeling that we're not perfect, right? That we're, as leaders, stepping into a space with a lot of servant leadership in mind and a willingness and a dedication to help and to support, but not coming into that space because I think I know everything. Really trying to value what everyone else brings to the table. Because if there's anything that I've seen through all of my experiences, it's those relationships, right? And that amazing community that we have the opportunity to build as leaders, where you're able to bring just the right people to the table. In my context, the right educational leaders, the right teachers, and then lucky for us, the right students, right? And when you get this incredible group of people together, then we have this opportunity to achieve something that's really, really powerful. Yeah, and so that's me. That's where I'm at. That's been my journey. I hope that it's something that you all might have been able to take something from.
That's fascinating. That's great, great to hear. And by the way, you made it sound very easy. A lot of it, Lural. I'm really curious. Was it actually that easy? So maybe I'll start with. By the way, before I go in with my conversation, Lural, my request to all guests: any questions, anything you want to know more of, anything which stuck with you, please use the dialog box to put your questions or your comments or anything you want to share so that we can bring that into the dialogue. So I'll start with, we by the way, already have something coming up here, which is wonderful. Thanks, Sarita. So I'll start with Lural, your transition through through different countries. You actually made it sound very easy, but personally, I have made those transitions, different parts of the world, different geographies, and
Okay.
it's tough. It's a bolder
Good
choice.
job.
In fact,
Let's
in
not.
a sorry, if I can request everybody to go on mute, please. So, it's not easy in a way that when you move to a new environment, you are not prepared for everything. You're prepared for some of the things. In my case, Lural, I was supported by my organization. So I moved career-led kind of transitions. Whereas you made choices which were driven by your heart, your decisions, your kind of mind. I want to go make it happen. And as I said, you made it sound very easy. But tell me, what were the biggest transition challenges? Different societies, different cultures, different environments. Any of your transitions, when you look back, which was the one which was most challenging, and how did you handle that?
Yeah, no, I mean, 100%, they've all been challenging. And I always try and, especially when I'm speaking to my students about things like this, remind them that it's challenging throughout, right? We often see the product of the choices that people make, but we don't necessarily speak about the process as much as we should. So I have found challenge when I'm making a decision, when I'm thinking about making a decision. I've found challenge in what the right decision might be. And then even when you make a decision, you think, did I make the wrong decision? And then, like you said, I think, especially when you move into a new context, there's only so much that we can know, so especially for us, coming from Latin America, where we had been for so long, and not to say that every Latin American country is the same, because that's one of the misnomers, right? Is that they're actually quite different. But you get this sense of kind of the way of being in Latin America. And I was keenly aware that coming into Asia, it was going to be different. And, you can read and you can learn, but the truth of the matter is there's just no amount of entirely understanding what will be different or what will be appropriate or what will be inappropriate that you can know until you're in it. And so it can really rattle your confidence, right? Because we'll all have those moments where you're not intending to offend or to do something so improperly. You just don't know what you don't know until you're in the middle of it, realizing, oh man, I didn't do this right. And so it's really challenging. I think, when I think about specifically my way of being and what helps me, I try and laugh a lot. I try and have a good sense of humor about myself. And I try and have a good sense of humor about life. I think especially when we first started working, my husband and I, and we worked with students living in abject poverty, these were students who were hungry every day, who had serious medical issues, whose parents were incarcerated on drugs. Their problems were real problems, real big problems. And I am really lucky that those are not my daily problems. And so if you sit in some perspective is what I always try and challenge myself to. Any problem that I might be having is not the biggest problem in the world. There are other much bigger, much more challenging problems. And so I do feel responsibility there to respond to the problem with the level of gratitude that it warrants, and not to make it bigger than it should be. So I think it's good to have, the actual emotion one has towards something, but then to also move on from it, to find a sense of humor about it. And to try and make light of what doesn't need to be taken so seriously, and just get on with it because it's going to be okay. And I think, yeah, we should take our work quite seriously. I think oftentimes we take ourselves a bit too seriously within the work that we do. And I think having a good sense of humor is a healthy thing.
Very, very well said. So, Lural, tell me the bigger purpose which drove those choices. And you made the choices, you're happy about it, and you made those work, made those stick. What was the driver behind those choices?
Yeah, I think really it comes down to challenge and impact. I think I'm as much driven by personally challenging myself and ensuring that my children are challenged. I really feel just this incredible responsibility to raise children who are going to be really good contributors to the world. And I'm mindful that they could run the risk of being too comfortable. And I want them to feel adequately uncomfortable. And so, yeah, very, very keen to model that myself and to really push them to be as challenged as possible. But then from there, I think I just have such a service orientation. I need to be doing something that I know is contributing to the betterment of the world in some way. And as long as I feel like that's what's happening, then I'm quite keen to continue on. And I've always kind of gone to places and stayed there for quite an extended amount of time. So I don't scare off easily. If things are challenging, I kind of find that interesting. And I find it motivating to move beyond the challenge. And then where I always get a little itchy is if things are getting a little too easy, then I think it's maybe not interesting enough. And surely there must be a problem somewhere that I can help with. So yeah, maybe it's just that obsession for personal challenge.
That's wonderful. That's great, Lural. And I can tell you, your kids are growing in an environment where that's got to come naturally to them. So this is not only about your own growth, you're actually helping the entire family to go through that experience. I've got a couple of great questions coming up. So let me improvise a little bit. I'm going to get one question right in. Sarita, why don't you unmute and bring up your question to Lural?
Yeah, thank you, Atul, and thank you so much, Lural, for sharing your inspiring story. And the question I shared with Atul is definitely the one, but while you were sharing your story, you being challenged, I mean, you keep challenging your kids. So I got really super curious because I'm raising two young kids, a boy and a girl. So definitely I would love to hear from you some tips, right? Or how do you challenge them? So that is first question, but I'm going to come to the next question for sure.
Yeah, no, and I'm actually quite passionate about this. So thank you so much for asking that question. You know, when so I have three children. Joaquin is 17, Santiago's 15, and Quetzal is 12. So just 2 to 3 years apart, all three of them, 2 boys and 1 girl. And when they were little, I remember taking, I think it was a parenting class that I'd actually organized for the parents at our school and that I sat in on as well and benefited just as much from as a parent as the parents were benefiting. And I remember the parenting experts saying, you know, if you're walking down the street with your toddler, you know, 2 to 5 year old, you really want them to let go of your hand and walk ahead of you, right? And you really want to encourage them. You know, you're watching them, but encourage them to go. You don't want to be that parent going, oh, be careful. Oh, you know, don't, you know, let them go. And then he said, and there's going to be a moment where they turn around and they're going to look for you. And then you look at them and you tell them, I see you, you're doing fine, keep going. And I have never forgotten that because I just try and hold myself to a parenting where I trust my children. I'm encouraging them to take risks. But they also know I'm watching them. You know, if they turn around and they need me, I'm going to reassure, I'm going to keep them going, but I'm not going to tell them not to go. And I try and really hold my own fears to myself and allow them to live their life. Not overly afraid of what might happen. And I think people find that quite shocking about our kids. I mean, we've had plenty of people wonder if we're making the best parenting choices because we allow my 12-year-old, for example, rides her bike quite independently to different places. And some people would say that that's not safe, but she rode her bike across Central America. She's quite a good cyclist. Like she's okay, you know, so they don't head into these challenges not having been prepared. And I think it really is just that gradual release of responsibility, right? If you know me, you know that I spend most of my free time with my children and my husband. And so I just really believe in setting my kids up for knowledge that they can then do on their own. And my goal in life, I just hope that I will raise 3 independent, society contributing children who don't need me or need me appropriately, right? But not overly need me. So I guess that would be my advice.
Thank you so much. Though I still find it not so easy because being a mother, we get so protective and everything, but I'm definitely going to be more courageous to let them go and try and fail also. So thank you so much, Rural. And the second question was, you mentioned about the Eastern wisdom, right? The awareness of interdependence of all things. And that got me curious. So if you can shed some light on that, would be really helpful.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's something that I'm currently learning a lot about. What I think is interesting is there's definitely this this very Western approach, which I think I do quite well of just like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and really, having some strength within yourself. And even when things are hard, you just keep going. And it's quite an independent approach. I was 17 when I left home, and I never went back. And I've lovely parents. There's no conflict. There's no reason there. But that was quite valued and seen as a wonderful thing. I think my parents were quite proud of me, that I would not need them, that I would go off and be fine. Made them very happy. And I mean, I just said it myself, if my children go off and are independent and contribute to the world, I'd be so happy. I think the downside of that, right, is that lack of interdependence that is also a positive, right? I'm really learning about that power of community here, and how those relationships that we all have are complex, right? But having that awareness of relationships and cultivating relationships can bring you through complexity in a very different way than just having a lot of inner fortitude and independence and strength in yourself can do. And personally, I just think, as I've thought about everything, I mean, I remember when I was a literacy teacher really early in my career, I used to really like to take a literacy approach with first graders that I would call an eclectic approach. So you look at the kid and you think, do you need to learn through phonics? Okay, then I'll teach you phonics. Okay, you are going to be a whole language reader. I'm going to teach you through a whole language method. And as an educator, you have a lot of tools, and you're applying the right tool to the right child at the right time. And I just think about that from a wisdom perspective as well. What an amazing thing it will be after we have many years in the East and we can develop more Eastern wisdom, to then have that in our toolkit, right? Of understanding how to navigate the Western world and do so effectively, and have had those experiences, and then to understand how to navigate from an Eastern wisdom perspective will just be incredible, right? I always think for my children, I want them to put their foot anywhere and feel comfortable, right? And to know what to do, and to be those chameleons who can just change how they are and who they are to the context that they're in, and feel just as comfortable in a small hut in Mexico, eating, food that they caught out of the river, as they are in a fancy hotel at a fancy brunch, and to be able to have those very different experiences, to understand, how do I dress differently? How do I act differently? How do I relate to people in a different way? That power of personal experience and personal relationship, I think, is what really matters, so that you're not aloof, right? And you're not also too insular in your thinking, that you've had enough powerful and meaningful experiences across the spectrum of experience of life, that you truly can understand people in a way that's more profound and more in depth. I think if we look at kind of the future of the world and the future of leadership, it's through understanding, I think, right? If I don't understand you, then I don't know how to help you. And then I might have good intentions, but I might go about it in all the wrong way. And so I need to have enough variety and depth of experience to understand as best I can.
That's awesome. Thanks for Sarita asking great questions and wonderful responses, Lural. I have another great question here from Bhaskar. Bhaskar, can you go off mute and bring up your question?
Thank you, Lural, and thank you, Atul, for bringing to fore these amazing life journeys, which are so very rare. My question to you, Lural, is right from your Linfield days, through your journey to UWC Thailand now, it has always been about paying forward instead of the rule of the game where some good-natured souls decide to pay back after being successful in their lives. So my question is, what is lacking? And you have been close to the education system in both the developed world and what is called the emerging world or undeveloped world. What is lacking in the current education system globally, which brings many more individuals like you as an output rather than being the other way around?
Well, it's interesting, and thank you so much for the question. I oftentimes think that the fact that I even have this job and that this is not my first head of school position is a testament to the change that we need to have in education systems, right? Because there's those that would say that I think I was 30 something, 32, 33, 34 when I was head of school for the first time, which some would say is too young, right? And then I'm a woman, and some would say, well, that can't work. And so sometimes I feel like we, in an education sector and in society in general, we look at what we knew, what we experienced, and then we want that to be what continues, right? So, I mean, for me, growing up as a kid, I never took an art class in my life. We didn't have an art teacher. I never had art. And so if I was sticking to what I know, I would never have an art teacher in any of my schools, right? Because I didn't have art. So art's not important. And I think too often we feel comfort in what we know, and that feels safe, right? And so if I learned in a really rote way and I memorized and I did well with that, then that's probably how we should approach education, because that feels safe, right? That worked for me. And so that should work again. And I understand that fear, right? It takes a lot of bravery to approach, whether it's hiring someone young or, hiring someone who is non-traditional to the position that you're looking at, or approaching education in a really different way. I think it feels scary for people. And within an education sector, I especially have seen this concept of more being better. So, if learning to read is a good thing, and we want people to be good readers, and we want them to be able to make inferences and be critical thinkers, well, then they should probably just read more, right? Maybe if we just filled the day with nothing but reading, then we would achieve that goal. And I would just argue that there's lots of different ways to read, and lots of different contexts in which a child could be encouraged to apply their reading skills. And so that holistic kind of very liberal arts, which I fell in love with at Linfield, that liberal arts approach to learning, is in my mind the way that we should go. And when I went into Linfield as a double major, taking way too many classes every semester, but I just really wanted to learn as much as I could. I took all of those classes that would take me toward a Spanish major, took the classes that would take me toward my communications major, and I took Hebrew, and I took meteorology, and I took all of these things that had nothing to do with Spanish or communications. And it contributed tremendously to who I am. And I don't think that taking extra communications classes would have been better than taking Hebrew. But that was, again, that's the bias of my personal experience. I think knowing a little about a lot of things is a really powerful thing, helps students make connections. And I think especially with the world that we're going into, we have computers, AI, our kids don't need to memorize things. The computers will do that for them. So they really do have to be able to think about things. They have to be able to receive information and be critical thinkers. And I think in too many education contexts, there's not a real bravery to move away from that traditional mindset of learning and to really move into the way that we should be best setting our students up for the future, because it's scary and it's hard, and people just don't have the muster for it. It's too difficult, I think. And heck, it's difficult. I mean, sometimes I do think to myself, it would be so much easier if I just made that simpler choice. It's a harder thing to make the hard choice, but you have to really lean into your values and what you know is the correct choice to make, and then make it no matter what, even when it's going to be difficult for others to receive that.
Brilliant. It's scary, hard, and unknown, which is the most difficult part.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
But the more you do it, the easier it gets, right?
Great question, Bhaskar, and wonderful to hear the way. By the way, you make it sound very easy, Lural. A lot of stuff which you share. When you have to go through it, that's the fun when you're exposed to it in reality. So let me ask a little lighter question. I think there are many talents which we have now in last 45 minutes or so come to know about who you are. Which are those talents about Lural which this world still needs to discover, which nobody knows? You would like to know.
Well, I think I don't, I always joke that I don't have any talent other than being very nerdy and really liking the things that I like. But I would say that this kind of random skill that I have that always helped me incredibly as an athlete is that I'm ambidextrous. And it's interesting because I was thinking the other day, I wonder if that's why dualities are not challenging for me, right? Because I can do things with either hand or either foot. It was incredibly helpful as an athlete. Go up for a layup in basketball with my right hand and then switch over to my left. So it's a relatively useless skill depending on the context, but it served me well and it's been kind of fun.
That's wonderful. By the way, that's very few people I know of who are like that. So that's wonderful. Tell me, you referred to a couple of leaders in your introduction, little people who, you quoted them, but who are those humans who inspired you as you were growing up?
So it's interesting because I remember as a child, my parents would watch Saturday Night Live, which I don't know, again, if you're not from the US, it might not have gotten to you, but especially in, back in the 80s, Saturday Night Live would come up on the TV at a certain hour and my parents wouldn't let me watch it. They wouldn't let me watch Saturday Night Live and they wouldn't let me watch In Living Color, which at that time were very kind of raunchy humor shows. But I would sneak behind the couch and I would watch them anyway. And I really cannot speak enough to how much laughter has meant in my life and how much comedians have meant to me. And I think especially a very good comedian is very smart, right? And to be able to make the humor that they make about the daily events requires a real intelligence behind that humor. So I laugh every day at something or the other. And I think that really does inspire me. It has always inspired me. I would really say though, honestly, at this point in my life, and I know this sounds incredibly cheesy, but my husband and I have been married for over 20 years now. And if you know my husband, you know how inspiring he is. Alejandro grew up in that tiny town in Mexico. He was one of the first people in his family to graduate from university. He got his master's degree. He's an incredibly generous, wonderful person. And more than anything, I think, as a female leader, as a young female leader, as a female leader who's had 3 children and worked through all 3 pregnancies, all 3 births, right after having children, right back to work. That doesn't come without an incredible amount of support. And I think what my husband continually reminds me of is just that real power of love and of care and of kindness. And just how important that is in our lives. And in my life, I'm really grateful to have my husband who contributes to my life in that way. But I think, when you look at the research on friendships and on relationships, it's very clear that you don't need this huge group of really important people in your life. You need just a few really, really solid people in your life. And I'm really grateful to have shared this life with my husband for so long. It's such a random thing to get married so young and to be together this long, but he really brings me so much joy. And he's definitely the better half if you know him. You like him much more than you like me. And he's just a really lovely person. But I hope that for everyone, right? And sometimes that comes in the form of a spouse or a partner. And sometimes it's just a really amazing friend. And so I always tell students, who oftentimes in education are so worried about their friendships and are they popular enough? And I always tell them, you don't need to have a lot of friends. Just get one really good friend. That's all you need. Just one solid friend who's going to be your bosom buddy, right? And is going to be there for you. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Great. I know we are it's amazing how this hour has gone by. I have one question from my very dear friend, Clarice. I'm going to ask her to come off mute and bring up her question. Over to you, Clarice. You're on mute, Clarice.
I think Sophia.
Mute. Okay. Hello, nice to see you and to hear you. So in fact, I am hearing all your steps of your life. And my question is, what about the future? Do you have specific plans or you wait step by step, looking at different opportunities, but without okay, in 5 years, I will be there. In 10 years, I will be there. What is your mind around this kind of thinking?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And sometimes my students ask me that as well, because they, we can all kind of tend to angst a bit, and not be in the moment we're in, but thinking about where we might go. I really don't plan ahead a lot. I'm really very much mindfully in the moment I'm in, and always just kind of seeing where life takes me. And the changes that have always come about quite organically. Like, we'll just know all of a sudden this is what we're going to do, and then we do it. Because I just don't know how I would ever know what would be coming. So I guess the more concrete way to answer is that I always know when I'm going somewhere that I will stay there for an extended amount of time. So when we went to Oregon, we knew we would be there until the school was on solid ground. And, when we started at that school, it had declining enrollment. When we left, it was a state winning school. It's an incredible school. Same thing in Costa Rica. I knew I would stay there as long as I needed for the school to be doing really well. And when I signed my contract here, I signed a 5-year contract. I'm a stayer, I know I'm going to be there for an extended amount of time. So I suppose if I think about long term, I think in that way. I don't ever make short commitments. I make long commitments. But I don't necessarily ever know, like, will I leave after 5 years? Well, maybe the board will want me to, but, I would imagine I will probably want to extend. I would imagine I'll want to stay a bit longer, because I think it's nice to be somewhere for a good amount of time. I really don't think you can make the same amount of impact if you're bouncing around from place to place. Although you can, obviously, there's circumstances. So I like to stay. And then I just always kind of know when it's time to make a change, but I don't worry so much about knowing that far ahead of time.
Yeah, understood. I think your answer is aligned with all your life, in fact, because you stay open. So, okay, you are serious because you are engaged in each opportunities, walks, and so, but okay, I am engaged, and the life will come to me, and I will see after, and I stay open for other opportunities later. But not such plans as we used to learn when we were in the past, in 10 years, in 15 years. Okay, so I like this. I like this way of thinking.
I mean, but I think it really does come down to having that comfort with discomfort, right? When we went on the sabbatical trip, we had nothing planned. We would literally be in Nicaragua, and then, we'd settle into wherever we were camping. Then we go, where should we go tomorrow? We had no plan. Looking at a map, which road could we take tomorrow? And I think when you practice being comfortable with that uncertainty, life is just so uncertain anyway. Then I think when uncertainty comes when I'm not expecting it, I've already kind of prepared myself for dealing with something I haven't planned for. So I think it can be quite healthy.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Gladys. I can't believe we are already at the end of the hour. I know that people have other stuff and it's a weekend. So, Lural, I really want to thank you for making this conversation so kind of breezy. We were just having a chat and it was so engaging and insightful. I think a lot of learnings. I mean, you have this very natural art of saying things and making things look and seem very easy. But everything you've done and you continue to do, the choices you continue to make are the ones which will have a huge impact on our future generations, as well as on the work which they are going to do to make this place a better place to live for everybody. So I can't thank you enough. I can't thank everybody on the call enough. Thank you so much for joining these dialogues. See, you make these conversations what they are today, and we want to make sure this dialogue continues, because more and more people discuss about what does it take to be a good human being in order to make a bigger impact. It will just extend the conversation to a much bigger population. So I can't thank you enough. Please keep dialing in for these dialogues. We'll come back very soon with our next guest, and we'll have our next dialogue in the month of Feb. So thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Lural, and thanks everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend. Thank you.